to Season 3 of RecLess, the podcast making you smarter and more knowledgeable about the field of parks and recreation. Your hosts are Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country who are joined by a surprise guest each episode. We're glad you're here. We hope you enjoy the ride. This is RecLess.
All right, welcome to the 51st episode of RecLess, podcast with three friends who work across the country, trying to make people a little bit more informed in the world of parks and recreation. My name is Shane. Got my good buddies here, Tom and Jay. Tom, how you doing?
I'm tired. I'm doing good though. Conference week.
It's conference week, Jay.
I'm good. Still live in person and enjoying this week so far.
Yeah, we normally have a bit of a banter discussion, and this one isn't going to be so much about your opinion on something. I just think we had an incredible night last night. When you're hearing this, it'll have obviously conference will have happened, and this event will have happened. But, you know, it's tough not to have whatever runner's high, or what do they call it, that euphoric feeling. Last night was really cool. We did our RecLess meetup, and we gave away shirts to some of our former guests, and we gave the shirts that people pre-ordered. But we just got to hang out and see a lot of people. And I just wanted to hear what was a cool moment, at least for each of y'all last night. And I can go first if you want a second. What I thought was cool is we'd gone outside. We were wearing our RecLess shirts, and Nile wanted a couple photos. Nile was with Next Practice Partners. They sponsored the shirts and ended up giving us some money that we could give to young professional Maria, which we were super excited about, something I think we want to continue. So we're outside taking a couple photos for Nile, and someone walks by and sees me in the shirt, and they say, "That's Shane from RecLess," which still blows my mind. And I reach out and shake their hand. I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" It was Jordan from Hoover, Alabama, and two of his colleagues from the Alabama area. And the funniest thing was, he said he was a fan, which was great to hear. We love to hear when people listen to the thing. But he said he sat next to Jen Basham on the bus, one of the shuttle buses. And he said he leaned in and he said, "Hey, I just listened to your episode on RecLess. I'm a big fan of you, the prototype." And Jen let out an audible ugh and rolled her eyes. And if that's all this podcast has done, is make people in our industry call Jen the prototype and make her hated, I've succeeded in my mission of having fun here. So yeah, that was a really cool moment. But they weren't at the RecLess meetup to talk to us. They didn't know it was happening. They literally just walking by, they see us, and they had a really cool story about how RecLess had done something for them. So it was cool.
Yesterday, and the whole experience was a little surreal. It wasn't anything that I knew we weren't prepared for what it would be like, right? We felt like there could be certainly 4 people, including Hannah, and potentially 45, 50 people.
Someone come pick up a shirt, drop and go.
Yes, right? Yep, come and go. So, you know, that part in itself, it started to feel small, the space, really quickly, because a lot of people came. So, in general, yeah, it was a great experience. If I could pull out just an experience or in true fashion of mine too, there was an instance when and Maria Cepeda, one of our former guests, she was a benefactor of this whole sponsorship from Nile and the shirts. So part of the premise here, why do we have sponsors? What are we doing this for? Well, we've talked about this ever since last year, and it didn't end up panning out. There was a young individual, young professional
from New York
that we were trying to get to conference. It almost happened. It just didn't work out. And so that whole experience spawned us trying to, how do we do this? How do we pull some monies together to get someone to conference who can't?
Because someone's done that for all of us.
Yes.
At one time, we benefited from someone helping us get it.
So that's kind of where the sponsorship was, hey, we're going to pay for these T-shirts, and then anything on the back end, we're going to do that. And so we were able to help Maria out, and I think that Shane, give you and Hannah a lot of credit. You were going to help her out anyway, just because, that's the kind of people you are. And I was on board and everything like that. But we had this large check printed, Happy Gilmore style. And Shane been telling me about it for weeks. And we didn't actually get a chance to present it to Maria. She just walked up into the social and saw it because it's so large, and she sees her name on it, and she started crying, like legitimate tears of joy and appreciation. and that was really special, right? If that's the one thing that we do out of this that benefits someone and makes them or gives them an opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have, then we've done a pretty great thing.
You missed it. She was here just a couple minutes before you were walking through and mentioned it, that it was so special to her.
Yeah, she sent us a picture. And then on a lighter note, real short, quick story, Trista Taylor, one of our fans. Yeah, she's great. She comments on everything and she seems to really enjoy, right? We got to meet her. Really good person. While her and I were in passing at one point, just walking either to the restroom or back to the social, she's got her shirt. She's like, I gotta go change. I'm like, right here? And she's like, no, I'm going to change. But she wanted to change so that she could get that picture with all of us having the t-shirt. And, I'm not really about that. It turned into this whole photo op thing that we didn't expect. But at least for Trista, that was kind of cool, right? Like just that we could share that moment with someone who appreciates this whole podcast.
It's cool to hear from Trista. She drives her daughter to work and listens to the podcast Friday mornings, which is cool. They're one of these folks that listen to it every Friday. And it's almost scary because I do curse on here. And I was like, oh my gosh, you let your kid listen to me curse and rant. She was like, she's heard it before. Anyways, she said the moment that we shouted her out and her daughter's in the car, that was really cool. They were both pretty geeked up about it. That's pretty cool.
I think she put a comment like, Mom, you're a celebrity or something like that. But that's awesome.
So Trista and her daughter, we hope you're listening and keep listening.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of moments that come to mind, and we talked about the shirts. There were so many people throughout the night that were commenting, we love the shirts, love the name. The first thing that came to mind, Shane, when you mentioned this was, we've talked a lot offline about why we're doing this, and a lot of it is just getting people connected, sharing the passion we have, staying in touch. And there were some moments last night at the social where I just overheard conversations of guests that didn't know each other, but they came to meet one another, get their shirt, and struck up a conversation that was 20, 30 minutes long, and now they're going to have that bond that they'll probably connect once they get back to the department. They're going to share some ideas, and that was because we planned this social. And I know that wasn't necessarily maybe thought of. It was just a gathering place for us to, greet everyone, thank them for their time being on the show, and maybe intentionally want people to meet. But the relationships that were built last night will last and probably go on to other conferences and future NRPAs. And, that's really neat to see. And, we've met so many people over our years of conferences through different socials. And it's kind of neat to know that we gathered one that will now have that impact on other professionals.
Mitchell and Jason from Oklahoma were there. And when Atuya came in and I was like, hey, have you met Atuya? He started geeking out. And Mitchell said to me, he's like, I'm getting to meet all the people I've heard on the thing. Like he was so excited to put hands on flesh on each other. Hey, shake hands, talk to people. Guys like Atuya and everybody else. And I think it was cool for the guests too, the former guests, to see people that were excited and heard their episodes and the impact. Because it's not about us. We ask a question, Atuya gives a great answer. We ask a question, and Rosalind gives a great answer. It's no one's saying, wow, no. The third question you asked, Tom, was the best question I've ever heard. That's rarely the thing that
it's never said.
They like to hear what the answers are. So it was cool for the guests to see that.
Yeah.
So just one more note before we bring our guest in.
Yeah.
So we don't want to keep him waiting. Shane was late to the actual meetup. I mean, that's impressive when you can organize a meetup trying to get all these people and these shirts and all the stress, and everyone showed up late.
Talked about getting there early to make sure we get tables signed up, get some snacks out there, get the shirts organized. And
to be fair, I had to go get the car, drive Anna and the shirts, drive it back, and then double back over.
No, and you look like you had walked a mile or two when you got there.
That's what I look like every time you see me.
But it was probably like 500 yards, but it looked like a mile.
Mary Bowie, I can't talk enough about last night, so I'm going to stop this. But Mary Bowie came in, she was maybe the first guest that arrived, maybe the second. So Mary of Maryland, we did a show with Mary in person, just like we're doing here, but it was just Jay and I in person and Shane on the screen. And who knows what that connection's like. It's probably different and nerve-wracking for Mary and for us. We're like, is this going to work? Who knew?
She didn't know her.
Yes, but more importantly, she will remember us forever because we had that. We used to have that like handshake, hug, bond. We see each other. We've known each other, and it was great. She didn't remember what Shane looked like completely, and she thought that two other individuals were Shane because Shane was late. One of them was Josh Keller.
The other was just a dude.
Yeah, just a guy with the beard.
That had beards.
Love that. Well, let's get to the guest. I'm excited to bring this one out. I think y'all, first of all, y'all know this guest.
Okay.
And y'all think highly of him, so to speak. This will be my first Academy guest, folks.
Ooh, what?
I know. I just thought, what a great.
I thought you were going to go forever.
So my guest has a BS in Recreation from Florida State and an MS in Recreation from Georgia. So undergrad, master's, and the degree. They are a distinguished alumnus from both of those. Any first thoughts?
I have one idea.
Okay.
And I know they're a big Georgia Bulldogs fan.
Could be. Let's see. They taught at the University of Northern Colorado and Metro State College. They actually taught one of my former bosses and my current colleague, Larry Foose. They did not like the words Parks and Rec. They wanted you to say Parks and Recreation. And it was so funny because I would always say Parks and Rec, still do. And my boss at the time, Larry, was always hammering me on Parks and Recreation. And when he was telling me this person told him that, I was like, oh, that person is currently my mentor. So speaking of mentorship, they will have been my mentor 15 years this week. And I've eaten lunch with them or dinner with them every year since.
Got an idea.
Okay. See, they have been the Camp Accreditation Standards Visitor and a member of the National Standards Commission for the American Camping Association, which isn't something we've talked about. They served on the Rocky Mountain Revenue School, NRPA Training Institute, and NRPA and American Camp Association boards. They were a former board director, past president of NRPA, the American Parks and Rec Society, and the Colorado Parks and Rec Foundation. They also started the Colorado Parks and Rec Foundation. So that funding source for the state's association. They've worked in Clark County, Georgia, Inglewood, Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, and Aurora, Colorado, where they were rec superintendent, ultimately the rec administrator when they retired. Any guesses?
Is it someone that we all work with heavily, or is a very big supporter of the externship program?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My guess. Yeah, you got it. My guess is Linda Kotowski.
All right.
Yeah, yes.
Welcome.
I'm honored, actually.
I don't know if you know this. I was telling Hannah last night. 15 years ago was Salt Lake. 15 years ago this week, we were assigned to each other.
Really?
How cool is that?
That's very cool.
And we've eaten every year since.
We have.
Yeah, Linda's really what I'd consider my first true mentor. I had people that were always giving me support in the industry, but Linda was the person from the very get-go that she was assigned to me, and I sometimes don't. Y'all know my feelings on mentorship. I always don't know if the assigned ones work as much, right? Because I was like, okay, I'll do it for a year or whatever. But Linda has always stayed connected to me, always stayed supportive. I've been able to call and ask her questions over the years and love her to death. I'm excited to have you on.
Well, I'm excited to be on. And what's pretty funny about all of that is you were actually my young professional fellow through NRPA on an extern.
Yeah.
And I've had young professional fellows and I've had externs. And so, like you said, some you click with and some you don't, but it was evident right at the very beginning.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah.
We connected.
I think because we both like to wear shorts.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's funny. When I talk about that first experience, first of all, and we've talked about offline, but I think it's important to talk about online. The fellowship is great. What an incredible opportunity. You go to a conference for free, get paired with someone. And at the time, NRPA used to always pair you with board directors, which they don't really do now. I wish they still did because I had to have my tennis shoes on. You ran me around all week. Like you had every board director meeting, and we were giving JR time that he printed out his schedule. I remember you had a printed schedule.
You're not alone.
Me too.
You had a printed schedule for me. You handed it to me, and I had my. Linda's not an out person.
I knew we had something in common.
And she had me running. I was going all week. But it was so cool to just sit in on those board director things. And the Robert Crawford, Jay, the Robert Crawford's a national young professional. No, the Robert Crawford is a really cool thing for your resume as well. But the externship that the Academy provides, if I could pick one for my career, and they said, Shane, you can only have this national board, this fellowship, or the externship, I take the externship every time. It gives you the same thing the fellowship does, and so much more, because you're then a former extern. You're an extern. Then after that first year, you're a former extern, and you're never not a former extern. Talking to Stacy Ayana from Louisville.
Yeah.
She's an Academy member now. She was a former extern. That's what she was talking to me about. She was an extern years ago. It's incredible. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about the extern program, because when we think about you, we think about how much you care about the extern program and these former extern. What was it about that portion of what the Academy provided that you were just so drawn to?
Well, I guess I may or may not have ended up in the right part of the profession, because I've always been focused on professional development and always bringing along staff, bringing along the future of the profession. So I'm the oldest in my family, so I took care of my younger sisters, and
So you were mentoring from a
it's sort of
young age.
it was sort of in the blood kind of a thing. So, and I remember when I was a young professional, so long ago, when I went to Colorado, I was 27, and there was a group of us who, within the Colorado has a organization within CPRA called CARA, the Colorado Association of Recreation Athletics, and we had various sports events and leagues just through CARA. And so there was this group of us, and that's really how I got started in professional involvement, was through CARA. And so there was I can't even remember what the issue was, but in CARA we decided how it was tennis, something around tennis, and we decided how it should be. So we went back and kind of informed our supervisors what we had decided, and they got together so we're all from different agencies. There's a representative from your agency to CARA, and so they kind of decided that we hadn't made the best decision that they thought we could have made. And we said, well, but it was our decision to make.
Yeah.
And so as a young professional, we kind of pushed back. And then they had a blue ribbon committee for something, so we created a red ribbon committee.
That's awesome.
And we all had our red ribbons on at a CPRA conference. And so I know. I'm usually
Sounds like something you would do.
Yeah. I'm usually so compliant.
Yeah, right.
Actually, I'm pretty much a rule follower. But I got involved, as a young professional, and thinking, I respected certainly the more seasoned professionals, but I also saw the value we were bringing with a different perspective. And so I always tried to keep that in mind as I was going through my career and looking at bringing staff professional development opportunities. And I did at one point have training as one of in my portfolio and when I was working. And so then with the extern when I became an Academy member, it was an opportunity. The extern program, started in 95, and I became an Academy member in 99. That's 1900 for those who back in
A difference in
there was a director in CPRA who was the generation before me, and he always said, well, when we used to circle the wagons, it wasn't quite that long ago, but I had the opportunity from fairly early on to be involved with how the program evolved, but again, because I was interested in professional development and keeping an eye on the next generation, that was how I kind of connected there. I haven't always been on the extern committee because of other involvement with NRPA and trying to do some other things with the Academy, but I've been on for quite a while.
Once you had your best extern or mentor ever, I mean, you're retired, right?
Well,
Can't get any better.
Shane was the first original back in '95. So I want to ask a follow-up question to that, because I was hoping to go in that direction, and so we might as well stay there. I think you told everybody, our listeners, why you fought for the externs and been a big advocate for the program. I want to provide a little bit of context. I was an extern back in Atlanta, so this has come full circle for me, which is really neat. I think that was 11 or 12 or something like that. And I agree with Shane, and I think Jay, we've talked about it a lot. Yeah, that is your name. And so we've talked about this. It's definitely an experience you wouldn't replace, right? I would pick this one over and over again, and I would point people in that direction. One of my first experiences with Linda, we didn't know each other that well, so to provide that context of how she's advocated, I don't know what it is that you or Michael Ann felt that I could do or whatever, but it was when you were first starting to get past externs back involved into the academy. And I believe my first project was the 50th anniversary. 40th anniversary. So it was the 40th anniversary of the academy, and we were doing basically some historical context, and you had asked me to help the group. I think it was Becky Benet, Michael Ann, Lord, and yourself, and then me. And you had asked me to help write an article for that. And for the externs, that portion of it, the history of the externship. So as part of the 40th. And it was such a great experience, and Linda is so detail-oriented. The amount of information and history and knowledge you have is overwhelmingly impressive, right? But it set me up for success, I think, in that role. I had a great experience, and from that point on, at least from my observations, a lot of former externs started to be involved here and there on all of these subcommittees and task force. And you and I went to a meeting, an academy meeting, about 5 years ago, maybe? It might have been around 19. And I was invited. I didn't really know where my place was. I was sitting on the sidelines. It was an actual board meeting.
It was the academy board meeting.
And the conversation was, we really want to see the externs more involved on committees. And it didn't go well at first.
Right.
But you fought a fight that I believe, again, you answered before, that you felt was worth fighting. So maybe some advice for people out there. I don't necessarily need you to, or ask you why you did it, but how do you pick those battles? And how do you approach that? That was you had people in the room that were in obviously powerful positions who were kind of opposed to it. Well, they're not part of the academy. They were externs. Why should they be doing the work of the academy? So how would you give advice to someone in their day job even of picking that battle? They know that there's something that's right out there, but how would they approach it?
Well, first of all, you did a great job of first doing a survey prior to us developing our proposal to the board of directors.
Hannah, edit all that out. Don't give Tom any credit.
And then helped me write the proposal. So what had actually occurred, at that point, the only thing the former externs could be involved in was the buddy program, which I think you suggested, as I recall. We really thought that there was, I thought, hadn't discussed it with anybody other than when we got the externship committee involved at that time, that we were missing the boat because you all were, just a great resource, and future academy members too. I have to say that's always been in the back of my mind, is that you're the leaders you're the younger leaders of the profession. You're the next cohort that's coming through. And so in order to benefit the academy immediately as far as the committee work, but looking for the future of the academy, looking down the road, many years in some cases and not so many in others, that was important. So what, I don't know if you recall from the board meeting, but there were some specific concerns.
Yeah.
And one of them was, they're not academy members, it's not in the bylaws. Well,
You change it.
if you knew the bylaws, you know that there were indeed there was another committee where you didn't have to be a member, but it was specified. It was actually the Pugsley Medal Committee. So it's not like we didn't ever have it. So somebody was advocating on the board for, well, we need to have that, and the other. So in your job, I'd say, one of the things I always listen to not only what people are against, but what people are for, and try to listen for that. And then, as you know, it took us a couple of years, and honestly, the board changed a little bit, and we had an advocate in Janet Bartnick, and she was willing to try something, and so that's how we first started. Well, actually, we were able to get Bobby Nance on the the general mentoring committee, because Stacy Dickey, again, we had advocates, we had other kindred spirits within the academy who were willing to kind of test this out a little bit, even though we had proposed a pilot. We didn't propose every committee, and some committees you could have been on anyway, but we had some advocates, and so we chose to start different ways. And I think the same thing's true when you're working, is you find the advocates. We did that when I worked in Aurora. We had a group of us who were looking at how could we look at a different a new recreation facility, and we found an advocate in the Chamber of Commerce or Visitors Bureau, and so we identified who was for the same things we were for, and then what was the message, what was important to them, and so then we just looked for where are the intersections. That's kind of where we went, and then when Janet was president, she was willing to ask other committee chairs who'd be willing, and actually almost all of those for which you could have former externs or general academy. Some committees like the Pugsley, you have to receive the Pugsley medal. For the membership committee on the academy, you have to have been an academy member for a certain number of years for nominating. But the other ones, for the most part, were very interested in giving it a try. So again, we looked for who was willing, and we went with that. We did same thing in your job, and then we evaluated. We asked the committee chairs to evaluate what the involvement was, and then we asked all of you who participated what you thought of the experience, and we also asked, what would make it better for you? How could it be improved? We asked the committee chairs the same thing. So I do the same thing at work.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of concept.
That's impressive what ended up coming about it, because there were some people on the board who now are advocates, who are now for it, but at the time, they weren't sure, right? They were tepid. So, I mean, what I get out of that is you got to do some research, present some research, find advocates, and I love what you said about, for those who are against,
let's
try to
more for now.
Try to feel what they're for, and then evaluate. I mean, that's such a great approach to any kind of, I guess going against the stream, right? Going against the flow. And it worked out obviously really well in this situation.
Yeah, I think, you've experienced other committees, and Shane, you got to be on the sustainability task force. That was a pretty critical one that's shaped the future of the academy. So yeah, I'm pleased that it worked out, and we did the second year of it under Tracy this past year, and we had each year we've had over 20 former externs who've expressed interest. But we did a little bit differently than the way the academy does their committee selection, because in the academy we only get to select 2 that we're interested in. And with the former externs, I wanted to have the opportunity to place everybody somewhere that they were interested in. So that's why we asked you all to identify all that you were interested in. And at least these first 2 years, we were able to place everybody in somewhere where they were interested. Now, as in any committee structure, some committees function better than others, and they have different, some have very specific objectives for a particular year, and some on an ongoing basis. As you know, Shane, you have been on the Mentors and Buddies, where we help with the matching, and so we have a very defined thing that we do. Whereas some other committees like the JEDI, they have formulated what their plan's going to be, and it differs from year to year, as is career development and some others. Mentoring, I know you've been on different ones as well.
So. For Esther and Becca, what does JEDI stand for?
Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Instead of doing DEI, they wanted it. They like JEDI.
That's our more.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, you and I worked together on the articles a couple years ago as one of the other committees. So there's always been a number of committees that former externs can get involved with. And for those listening, if you have not applied for it and you're, meet those requirements, I would highly encourage you to do that. And we could probably talk this entire podcast about the Academy and the extern program and opportunities for former externs. But I want to pivot a little bit, because when we were doing the intro and Shane was giving us some facts, he mentioned the American Camping Association. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked the other day briefly and did not know the history that you and I actually do share about working in the same town in North Carolina at a resident camp. And I have a passion for camping, and I love resident camp. Your involvement with that, what would you say was one of the reasons why you got involved with the ACA, and how can you suggest to other staff to do that and get involved with that, and what would that benefit their department?
I went to graduate school at the University of Georgia. I went to undergrad at Florida State. Back before that, I worked at Camp Blue Star in Hendersonville. There's different levels, the teenage camp and the senior girls and senior boys. And so one of the heads of one of those camps was Edie Klein, who was a professor at the University of Georgia. And when I was an undergrad, I actually did a practicum. We had to do 4 field works, they were called, and I did one at Camp Blue Star. I had a break in my work and decided that I would work summer, go back and see if I could work at camp. Well, Edie talks me into grad school, which I swore I would never go to. It's me an assistantship, and she was not only involved with Camp Blue Star, but she was very involved in the American Camp Association, called American Camping Association at the time. They've changed their name to the American Camp Association. So that was my, real connection to start with. But then when I was a recreation supervisor in Inglewood, Colorado, I ran our day camp. And so it made sense to stay involved with ACA. I became an accreditation visitor. And actually being an accreditation visitor was really helpful because you knew what all the standards were. And ultimately, I served on the Rocky Mountain section standards board, as well as the regular board, and ultimately ended up on the National Standards Commission for ACA and got to be involved in changing of standards. Again, I'm still working, so within the context, there were things that were coming up that I could say, for day camps, because that's what we were running, in our setting, that wasn't, that was going to be a challenge. So that's really why I was brought on to the Standards Commission, National Standards Commission, was to be sort of the voice of the local park and recreation agencies. But I think the value is that those standards are very good, and they're a great blueprint for how to make sure that you have all of not only the good programming, but safety and everything else.
When you're trying to have a ratio and they ask you why that ratio is what it is, you can, revert back to the standards from the ACA, and you're trying to follow those best practices that are put in place.
Just so far, everything about your career has led through service. You are someone that is very service oriented, whether you're serving on the academy or you're serving in the externship portion of that, and you've taken on some of that stuff, but even your service in the American Camp Association and going through that process, where do you think that came from? Why does that call out to you? Because it doesn't. We have 8,000 people at this conference, and I think the 2080 rule applies to everything. Whether you're at a church or you're at a local Rotary Club or even at this conference, I think 20% of the people do about 80% of the work when you're setting up, breaking down, getting people excited, presenting, mentoring, whatever it is. Whatever it takes to move a conference forward, about 20% of the people do it. And you're definitely in that 20%, and almost everything you seem to have passion about. So what is it about service? Is it just trying to make sure it stays on the rails, or it's better, trying to correct things? What do you think it is?
Well, that's a really good question.
It's also like, while you're thinking of the answer there, I just loved what you were talking about with the ACA and giving Parks and Rec a seat at the table. Right? Maybe not being as represented. I mean, obviously that's getting up to the highest level, but that's really important.
My father worked in the defense missile industry, worked for both at Cape Canaveral. And when he worked with both Northrop and with Lockheed, he was involved in employee recreation as an employee. So,
just organizing the softball leagues or whatever.
Yeah, whatever was going on. And my parents both served. I was in the band in high school. I'm one of those Parks and Recreation people who did not come through sports. I came through band, but each of them took a turn as Band Parents Association president. So I think that part, it's just what you do. And then the one thing that always stuck with me, I was a Red Cross volunteer for years. I taught swimming, canoeing, first aid, but that came from the first back in the day, when swim lessons were actually free, I took swim lessons in Melbourne, Florida, which is where I grew up. And the Red Cross volunteer who taught swimming, when she did the introduction, I don't remember her name. She had long brown hair. That's all I remember is long brown hair. And she said, "I'm a volunteer, and all I ask of you is that someday you do the same." That's why I became a volunteer originally with Red Cross. Not only in grad school, but at FSU, the faculty there was involved in FRPA, and they were involved with the beginnings of NRPA, because actually I started college in 1965, which is when NRPA was getting Oregon, when the merger was happening. So they were there at the beginning, and so they set the example, and it was an expectation. I mean, you were involved in the Recreation Majors Club, and you were involved on campus. And so where did it start? I'm not sure. It's just always kind of been there. It's the right people show up at the right time for the right reason. And I felt that with mentors too, is that when kind of like when the student's ready, the teacher will come kind of a thing. It's sort of that. I haven't volunteered for things that I don't feel that I can contribute for, and then there are different things at different times. There are times when you feel like I can do this, I should do this, I can make the difference here, and other times where it's like, I'm not the one.
Yeah. You've got a wealth of experience. We had Aaron Kuhn on an episode, and I don't want to keep necessarily going down that road, but while we're here, and it's relevant to what we talked about a couple days ago, what is it about Colorado? And I'm honest, we all admire what they do, with the recreation scene and the park scene, but also it's just that there just seems to be a culture of feel. And so for you, what is that? What drew you there? What kept you there? And is it the landscape? Is it the association? Yes.
Well, people don't believe this often when I say it, but Colorado was very much like Florida when I grew up, because it's very outdoor recreation oriented. Obviously, water skiing versus snow skiing, and not a lot of hiking in Florida, but people are outdoors. After grad school, one of my roommates and I camped around the country again, and it just so happened I was kind of looking for a job. I knew I needed a job after that, and so there was a job in Boulder, and so it worked out that I could interview for it. Now, I didn't get it, but we spent enough time camping in Colorado and in that part of the country that it just felt like, again, it was outdoors, but it added a different dimension. Then when I had the opportunity, I actually went to the NRPA at Congress and exposition. In Denver in 1974, I guess it would have been. I was working in Georgia at the time. After grad school, I did get a job in Clark County, Georgia, starting a new department there. But I went to, used to be the job mart. You take tons of resumes, put them on any jobs that were open, and you may or may not get an interview. And I did get an interview, and they flew me back out. I didn't get that job originally either, but at that point, the profession in Colorado was very small. I think CPRA had 300 members. So you knew everybody, and everybody was so supportive, and we did it. Things were, I don't know how it is now with you all, but for us, like we would have a CARA meeting, the athletic part of CPRA, and we'd all go out to lunch afterwards. And then you get on the CPRA board, and you might have a meeting in Vail, and then you go skiing afterwards. And, so it just
Sounds very nice.
Yeah.
Sounds different.
Yeah. And it was just kind of the way it was, and it was small. And at the time, Colorado was not as populated, and it just felt, and neither was Florida, frankly. So, and I grew up in a relatively small town in Florida. So it just felt it was just sort of this. Everybody did stuff outdoors. We used to joke about the staff that would come down for meetings from the mountains, because even in the winter they'd have their shorts on, and it's just a very outdoor oriented culture. And like I said, coming from Florida and spending most of the time outdoors anyway, that's how it felt. Very health oriented, active, and so I think that's part of what keeps it. And then, as a practical matter, there is a state retirement system, but not all the cities belong to it, and certainly not all the districts. So it's not like you can just move around a lot. So you'll see people stay at an agency for a long period of time, because if you don't, then you have to manage what your retirement situation is going to be. But very few people come to Colorado and leave. And if they leave, it's for specific. I mean, there are people who I know who have left to go back because of, parents, older parents, or, family types of things, or spouse had a better Janet's a good example. Had other opportunities like that. But very rarely does somebody just say, I don't want to work in Colorado anymore. I mean, you do have situations where it doesn't work out. It wasn't a good fit. And there have been those situations, and it's better for you have to do what's best for you, for sure. I don't know if that really answers your question.
I mean, it just seems that what you said at the end was people tend to go and then they don't come back to where they're from, and it just it intrigues me, right? So no, absolutely. I just have a quick follow-up to that. You said you didn't get a couple of the first opportunities, and we don't really talk about that a lot here.
Yeah.
That's tough. I've had situations where I didn't get a job. What kind of advice would you give? What was that like to go through the situation where I didn't get those jobs, but I know I'm going to keep pushing through? How did you do it? And how would you guide people who might have or might be on a similar journey?
Well, there were other jobs I didn't get too. When I was after grad school, I actually was looking at the job in Clark County, one at the YMCA in Anderson, South Carolina, and one with the Red Cross with the regional office in Atlanta. And so I didn't have the opportunity to get those other jobs. And I interviewed for a Y job up in Vermont too. And I just always believed that I would land in the right place, that if it was meant to be, it was meant to be. And I always give it my best shot. And sometimes, you go for an interview or you do the research before you even accept an interview or even apply, and you figure, well, or you get there and you do your research as you get into the profession. Obviously, people, and you say, so what about this agency, or what about this particular supervisor? Like when I was ready to move from after Inglewood, which is where I did start in Colorado, I actually taught at the University of Northern Colorado for 5 years because I thought I wanted to work on my doctorate, and then I decided I missed the field. So when I decided I wanted to go back in the field, there were only a few agencies that I really wanted to work in, because by then I'd been involved with CPRA. I knew people, and I knew who I wanted to work for and with, and which agencies I knew would be supportive. So I think, just have a belief in yourself, and that, do your research, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I did still feel I was very lucky that I found out later the reason I didn't get that job in Boulder to start with, because I became good friends with the superintendent of recreation who would have done the hiring. He said, well, I didn't think you'd stay because you don't ski. He said, obviously was wrong. It's like, well, yeah, you were, but I ended up in a great place. I had a great, it was a nice small agency. Great supervisor, and learned a lot. And I ended up working in Boulder after Paul Swoboda retired. I actually got that job eventually. So, yep.
It's interesting you say that. I had a conversation with someone yesterday that interviewed for a job. They didn't get it, and one of the feedback pieces they got was that they thought they were overqualified and that they wouldn't be there long, and they were looking for more of a long-term piece. And I think one of the things you were just touching on with like doing research for interviews is you're also, I look at things very differently sometimes when I interview, and I love interviewing. I love being on panels. I love being on every aspect of that. Is you're also interviewing the agency. Is it a good fit for you? And I think people forget about that. They want to make sure that, they're going to be that person that fits in there and they want to just get that role because they want that opportunity. But it may not be the right fit for what you believe in and your values and what that position is going to hold over time, because things can change and there could be leadership changes. And I know some of our friends are going through some leadership changes in different positions, and you just never know what that end result would look like. So it's interesting.
Real competitive in the interview process. Once they're in it, they want to quote unquote win it. They want that person to want them. And the concern from that I've talked to with some young professionals is it would be like a bad marriage. Like if you acted like you were somebody, and then you marry that person, and then you're actually true, not that person, they're going to become very frustrated with you because you have changed, and you're going to grow in a level of resentment with how they're treating you. So it's not always the worst thing. If you show up authentically true in the interview process and you're true to yourself and they don't want you, that's not a bad thing. I get that it's tough to hear that you were actually who you were and you didn't project anything and they still didn't want you, but believe that you don't want to be a place that isn't looking for your profile. Yeah. And that's all it is in a lot of ways.
There's also a lesson there about the hiring process from the other side of it, and that is don't discount people for just you make an assumption, right? Right. You know what I mean? I'm not picking on him. Like I'm sure I've been there too. Like
maybe that wasn't the real reason. He was just being kind.
No, it's a very interesting. You said it right. You're overqualified. I mean, I guess, and in today's climate, at least I'm experiencing, and Shane, you've experienced it differently. A lot of people, I guess it depends on where you are, but a lot of people are moving to maybe Austin.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people are moving to Rochester, New York area, right? So that's not. So my pool is different. It's limited.
Leave. I think that would help.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. It's possible. I'll look into it.
There might be an opening in Colorado.
Yeah, look at that. There's probably always some sort of.
I want to ask you a question about conference. Since we're here, we're in person. We were at a session together yesterday, and you just mentioned going to a conference in Denver in the 70s. So you've been to a lot of NRPA conferences. What are you seeking now when you're going to different sessions, or are there certain speakers that you just love seeing, and that's what draws you to choose what session you're going to attend?
Well, there's a variety of reasons, but this time, my intention was to see former externs present. I like to see what you all are doing and, be proud of you. And I feel like working with the former externs, even though it's not on anything specific to the field, that it's important for me to kind of know what you guys are going through out in the real world. So I don't read everything on NRPA Connect on the open forum, but I am a member of LDN and YPN, and actually I joined all the networks so that I could be able to post any extern opportunities and stuff. So I don't read, like I said, I don't read everyone, but some of them particularly interest me. I kind of try to follow some of the things. I mean, many of us who are retired now we're very glad we're retired and not having to deal with some of the things you're having to deal with. But, we look back, and although it doesn't seem in comparison to be as challenging as some of the things you all are doing, we have some challenges as well. But that's how I kind of picked them this time. Sometimes I do pick them because I love hearing certain speakers, and they make me think. And they, gives me, sometimes I'll find myself, just in a session, but out here because they've triggered something and I'm kind of thinking along that and then have to bring myself back. But it's good to keep your mind active and thinking about those types of things. And I love a lot of the anything related to environmental conservation, and I love planning, either strategic planning or any other kind of planning. I like that, so I'm drawn to more of those things than programming types of things or mentoring. I've been to her sessions before.
Bobby's incredible.
Yeah, and Jay did a wonderful session 2 years ago
Yeah,
now.
yeah, we'll edit.
Yeah. When you did for YPN and Adrian, Lacey, and Chris and Dr. J did the panel. You know, it's very interesting to hear those kinds of things, and you know, what your perspectives are and how things have changed and how some things have stayed the same.
We're in the Atlanta area,
Yes.
and you at least did grad school near here. Has traffic gotten any better? This is the worst freaking town to drive in.
Well, the only time I rarely came to Atlanta.
Yeah,
I can't tell you. I would guess it has,
yeah,
but I couldn't tell you for sure.
Worse.
yeah.
Yeah, I stayed in Athens pretty much.
Is that where Clark County is? That's Athens?
Yes, yeah, and that's
So-
where UGA is.
When you said you started the department there, what was that like? Because Jay's done that. Tom and I have never had that experience. What's it like starting a department?
Interesting. It's very interesting. I was fortunate because the board chair, Charlie Clegg, was a professor at UGA, one of my faculty there, and so that was interesting to have him. I mean, have his support. But it was a different time. It was. They didn't have a plan. They just wanted to start a county department, and the city of Athens had a department, and ultimately they merged. As Jay knows, you hire staff. It was interesting to develop the relationships that you needed to develop. Again, it was a different time. One of the things that we did, because you didn't want to obviously duplicate what City of Athens was doing, because they had a really excellent department. So we worked on nature trails, and ultimately a nature center was built. And actually, I'd had a number of, in grad school, I focused on outdoor recreation. So I had forestry classes and environmental design. So I utilized the university, the professors from the university to help with, you know, some of that stuff. But it was fun because, I mean, I'd be out with one of the forestry professors, and I are out flagging a nature trail. So you had that, and then you're going to the county commissioners with your budget. We also had at that time, I don't know what it's, I mean, again, this was like 1974, 4, somewhere in there. And we had the Clark County Correctional Institution. County employees could eat lunch there. So I got to be friends with, I don't even know what his title was, whoever was the head of it, Captain Looney. I swapped him some recreation classes for the county correctional institution did the asphalt overlays on, so I had them.
So you taught rec classes at a local.
Yeah, we had somebody. I didn't, but I had somebody. Yeah, I had them pour me a basketball court on their way back from laying asphalt one time. So
if that is not partnerships at its finest,
and that's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned something because you have taught as well,
Mhm.
and you didn't hear it because you were outside. I said you actually taught one of my former directors, Larry Foos,
Mhm.
at one time. He works with me now in Pflugerville. The rec industry, as far as a degree, is dying off.
yeah,
I mean, every year we see another casualty of a big department. In fact, I think my university no longer has it. Your university no longer has it.
As of spring.
Yeah, and so I think it's just one of those things that people are coming to the industry in a different way, I guess, or that they didn't maybe lean as heavily into the degree and degree majors as they used to for hiring. I don't know what the reasoning is for that, or maybe there's 15 different reasons for it. But what do you think the future of the education side of recreation is going to look like?
boy, I haven't really thought about that or talked to some of the folks who are still in the field, still teaching or retired from it. I really don't know. One of the things that I did feel about going through a degree program versus learning on the job, because I think you can learn a lot on the job, but philosophically, some of that theory base and philosophical base would need to be taught somewhere.
Yeah.
And actually, I think way back when before the merger that created NRPA, they had the National Recreation Association did recreation schools, because that was before. You think about professional preparation in the profession. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but maybe 50s or something like that, with like Indiana University and Illinois and Penn State, Texas A&M, some of the biggies.
The ones that are still around.
Yeah,
But
yeah, actually. But they had the National Recreation Schools where you could learn. And so we actually talked about doing sort of co-op. How some places co-op. Well, I talked with our HR director in Aurora in the 80s about trying to do some co-oping kinds of things, because I did have this discussion. One of the summers when I was teaching, I was talking with one of the state park staff, and we talked about what you could learn on the job and what you didn't get. And that, okay, so we could teach all of these things on the job, but how would we bring in, why are you doing all of this? And I guess a kind of a national recreation school kind of a thing might work.
You're on the supervisor management school. Are you now having to teach things that you think should have been or would have in the past been taught at a university level? Like, are y'all having to fill a void?
So we're actually allowing some open time at the end of the week to allow students to give us opportunities to let us hear what they want to learn about. And that might come from that context of, and we're doing it beforehand, so they can fill out a survey leading up to it as, hey, we're going to have some roundtable discussions. Are there topics that you want to lead yourself that you think is important for everyone to hear? Or are there other topics that you want us to teach on that we didn't cover or are not covering? Because they know what the syllabus is for the week. So this is my first time. I have not been there yet. So it's kind of hard for me to judge that, but we'll find out in about 3 weeks when we're there.
Related, not specific to your question, but I've had the opportunity to supervise folks who have come from the private sector, like in gymnastics or something, and the way to help them work through some of the differences working in government is another aspect that can be challenging when you have folks who don't come through a curriculum that has emphasized any of sort of the governmental aspects of things.
You've been so gracious with us with your time. So we usually kind of wrap this up with just a couple of round robins, and they're a little bit more personal related. Some could still be work. I get in trouble if I don't say that. I know that you're very active in your retirement. You travel and you like to do things. What do you like to do to unwind? What's a fun trip for you nowadays?
A fun trip involved being outdoors, hiking, going to seeing, getting
Eclipse.
the eclipse. That's right. I came down and stayed with my niece, went to the eclipse. I got to see a grizzly on the side of the road in Yellowstone this summer and some wolves and things that I don't see that often, or being on the water. Growing up on the east coast of Florida, the water was really important. So to me even just getting out, I could just take my kayak out on the lake and look at the birds and be happy.
I'd like to have two questions in one. I think this is my 15th conference. It's crazy to think that, right? For me anyway. Sure. So my question for you is, how many NRPA conferences, if that number is something that you have, and was there one city or location that just really sticks out? This was the best conference I've been, NRPA specific.
Sure. Well, I went in 74 to Denver, and then I didn't go again until, I want to say, around 82-ish, when I was CPRA president. And so then all of the ones after that, except for, obviously, Orlando, but I did do it virtually. I did not go to Nashville because they were a high COVID, and I didn't want to go, and I missed Dallas. So however many that is.
You missed 3 in 42 years after 82.
Okay.
That sounds about right. That's amazing.
And is there one? Oh, gosh.
About 40.
I guess I'd have to say it'd have to be Baltimore when I was NRPA president, because that was an exciting. Number one, I love crab cakes.
Yeah, Baltimore's a great city.
And I had worked on the Congress program committee, the previous Baltimore Congress, and had enjoyed getting to be out and getting to see some of the different places within Baltimore. And the other thing that happened during that conference, even though it wasn't the one when I was NRPA president, is I got invited to go on a boat with colleagues at the end of the conference, and we sailed up into the Bay, and when we passed so Baltimore, 2 conferences in Baltimore, they both have to be together. We passed where the little buoy is or whatever, where Francis Scott Key supposedly saw the Star Spangled Banner. And all of us on the boat just sang the Star Spangled Banner. All these recreation colleagues, I mean, guys and gals, it was both of us. So Baltimore, I think both Baltimores, for those reasons, were very special.
What year was that you were chair?
I started in fall of 2007 and then 2008. Is that when you had me go to an organizational meeting of YPN or something? Because I met you either in Baltimore or
It was the next time. Minnesota.
Minnesota, yeah.
Because I know you said you need to go to this meeting, and I was introduced to you, and you were actually an extern when I was extern committee chair. I remember.
Always connection in some capacity.
Linda did her very first tweet with me.
And only
That's one more than I've ever done.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about Colorado, and I'm going to try to plan another trip back there. My wife and I went there a couple years ago. Absolutely loved it. If I need to go back, what's the one city and hiking spot I need to go to?
Well, from a hiking standpoint, although now because of ticketed entry, you have to do well in advance, would be in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Okay.
There are many wonderful hikes there. The Estes Park's a fun place to go. As far as a city, I'd go off the beaten path somewhere, like down to maybe Durango or Crested Butte, or so if you like kind of being out away.
I love finding like gems in small towns, restaurants and shops.
I would go to go over that way. I mean, you pretty much can't go wrong, but I would pretty much stay away from the populated areas.
We did that we've already been in Denver, so I got to go somewhere different.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Tom and I don't think you were there, Jay, in Baltimore had Captain Crunch French toast.
Jay was there.
What are you guys there?
Yes, he was there.
Don't get your feelings hurt, okay? But you didn't eat the Captain Crunch French toast.
No, I think that's what he
That's
ordered.
actually
That's
what
not
I
what he ordered. I ordered the
too.
crab with
What did you
hollandaise.
order? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I got pictures.
Looks like I know I'm going out to lunch with someone today.
Bring it.
Not
Yeah.
one of them.
Fine. Thank goodness. We went to lunch yesterday.
I know he actually felt very left out.
Yes.
He asked me what the invite was.
But conference provides you an opportunity to try some pretty unique meals. We are all foodie type folks. So can you think of any in the 40 plus years that you were attending conference or congress that you're like, wow, that was an incredible meal or a pretty unique meal experience, and if it wasn't for this conference, I probably wouldn't be in this town and have tried this location?
Oh, wow.
That's a tough one. Not counting crab cakes, because you did mention.
I know. Darn, would be my one.
Yeah, you can.
This will sound strange, but the aborted conference in Miami Beach, where I got CEUs actually, because
Really?
I went to a pre-conference session, but we had a group of us who always went before or after. We either have a pre-trip or a post-trip. We went to the Keys. It was the gang, Lori Daniel, Jane. I don't think Jane was with us actually. Some other folks brother from another mother, Doug Hawthorne, who's was the park superintendent. I was the recreation superintendent in Boulder, and Doug and I decided we were going to research the best key lime pie.
Oh.
And so I would have to say, even though we weren't in Miami Beach when we did this, we did find pounds later. I'm sure it took us forever to lose the weight, but yeah, we the key lime pie.
That sounds like a pretty good pursuit. It's funny that aborted. Someone had asked me if NRPA had ever been canceled due to weather, and I said there was one in Florida. I couldn't remember
Miami Beach.
what the location was, but if this week was Orlando,
Yep.
it may be.
It would have been shut down.
And the reason they did was because the conference center had to be used for emergency shelter if necessary.
But that's pretty scary just to think about that.
Thank you so much for the time.
Well, thanks for
This has been
inviting
great.
me. It's been fun to listen to your podcasts, and I just saw John Stutzman on the way over, and he introduced me to Megan.
Oh yeah.
Melkenberg, and we were talking about the externs, and he didn't know I was coming here. He kept that a secret because you told me to.
Had to keep
But
it.
I said, you guys are my peeps, so
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate you thinking of me.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
This
thank
was
you.
great.
But I really enjoyed learning more about you all the time. Thank you.
Thank you for spending time. This is great.
Absolutely.
We'll see you tonight.
Man, that was a lot of fun. Linda's one of those people that had a huge impact in my career.
On a lot of people's careers.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
You for sure, and I think I might have met her because of you at one point. But everyone that's gone through the extern program has had an impact from her in different
Oh my
capacities.
gosh, she's like the freaking godmother of all of us.
That's
And
really awesome.
she's always, I love that she scheduled everything to just see her former externs and see how they're all doing. How great is that?
That answer of why she chooses which sessions to go to because she wants to see externs speak is a testament to show how much she cares about that initiative and that program.
When the Young Professional Network was starting, there was a lot of people that thought it was a crazy idea, and we've talked about it in some ways. And Linda was my NRPA filter. You know, I didn't know a lot of people in NRPA. I didn't come from an education system that was cranking out, colleagues. I didn't go to A&M, Penn State, Clemson, etc. And so, when I got paired with her, she was my NRPA filter. I call her all the time about things, and she was one of the first people that thought, yeah, that's a good idea. You should do that.
That's cool.
She never paused. She never once thought, oh, that's not something that we should do. She was always supportive of it and has always been supportive of me. I've called her about jobs in other parts of the world because she knows so many people.
Yeah.
Hey, do you know any Academy members here that would give you an honest opinion on blank job in Oregon or whatever? And she does. She knows everybody. She does. She's one of the nicest people on the planet. I love to see her. And she's been a huge impact and a huge advocate for people of our profile.
And just development. I mean, obviously, she talked a lot about personal development, and that's such a core belief of us three.
Yep.
And, that obviously has been one of her core strengths from day one.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that story I told just to reminisce with Linda, I mean, that's development, that's support of the externs, but I mean, it's not an opportunity I would have had, right? She comes up and she says, or they reach out, would you like to write this article? And Jay I forgot about that, right?
Yeah.
You had organized, not only was Jay writing an article, he was organizing others to write articles for them.
You wrote one.
I did, yeah. So putting people in opportunities to develop, and there's no better. She's very humble about it.
Yeah.
She kind of does it behind the scenes,
Yeah.
but she does it in such a wonderful way that people respect. And
what I have loved about my relationship with Linda is when you say her name to someone else, the genuine excitement or joy that the other person thinks about when they hear Linda's name. When I say, "Oh, Linda was my mentor," or "We're going to lunch with Linda," or "I just saw Linda," no one has ever been like, "I hate her. Oh my gosh, how do you handle?" I got cross with her one way, and I've never talked to her since. She is genuinely one of the most well-loved people at this conference.
Another reason why, other than what we've already said, we didn't talk about it, she will text or call, and she'll ask me, how's my family?
Yeah.
She'll ask me, send me pictures of your babies, right?
That was last night.
She'll I showed her last night, but she'll randomly just kind of shoot a text. We haven't caught up, looking forward to seeing you in a couple months or whatever. This was, a couple months before the conference. Send me a picture of those babies when you can. So, I mean, she cares.
Yeah, we ran into her last night at the aquarium, and she's first thing, how are the kids? How's the family? Let's see some pictures.
Yeah.
We're pulling out pictures last night.
She's great.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that wraps up this week in podcast. That was fun. Got to add some more people to it. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.